The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. And we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the third day of this 7-day sesshin here at Mountain Gate. And it's another beautiful fall day, the best time of year here in northern New Mexico. And I'd like to continue with our search, excuse me, gotta adjust the cushion here, our search for reality, for who we really are, for mind with a capital M. And to that end, let me share the words of a few people, one of whom is Geshe Kelsang Gyatso. Geshe Kelsang Gyatso. Geshe is a title. It's kind of like a PhD. And the title of this book is Transform Your Life, A Blissful Journey. It's an interesting subtitle. For some of us, it's not so blissful. I know for myself, it was a real challenge. And if we're to really go deeply into our practice, it can be a real challenge. What we're doing is searching for the truth, true reality. Most of us come to practice with some sense that there's something beyond the usual that we can open to and recognize, and that is worth doing. Not just worth doing, it's one might say it's imperative. And that is true. We have this human life, and it is incredibly valuable. Through it, we can come to realization of the true nature of reality. And through that process, if we're doing it correctly, also see through the various ways we're caught in creating dysfunction or living in dysfunction, which is causing pain and suffering to ourselves and to others. We're all trying the best we can. We don't ever intend to be dysfunctional, but it often will turn out that way. Simply our childhood conditioning can steer us in that direction. And very few of us, very few human beings have enlightened parents. And even those enlightened parents may not see through all of their blind spots. Coming to awakening, full, deep, complete awakening, is a long process, lifetimes long, really. But how exciting to be on the path. Truly, how exciting to be on the path. Our normal way of reacting when we are shown up, so to speak, as behaving in maybe not as so optimal way, is to react, defend ourselves, try to rationalize it, and so on and so forth. And of course, many of us also seek to change the habit pattern that would create that, the conditioning that would create that way of being and reacting. And that's all part of our practice, actually, even though in the traditional Japanese Zen way of training, we are told to basically focus on our koan and cut everything else out, ignore everything else. Create a situation in which there's a Zoom screen behind us, so to speak, where we can appear to be a really wonderful human being. And at base, we are. And that's what's really hard for a lot of people to comprehend, that underneath it all, we're incredible, wondrous human beings, worthy of respect, love, gratitude, and a good life. But our habit patterns that were developed as we grew up, in our conclusions that we drew as a result of our experiences, particularly experiences with people close to us, and those are the more powerful experiences, actually. We develop certain ideas about ourselves and about the world and about reality. And all of it keeps us prisoner until we work really hard in an ongoing manner to truly recognize what's underneath it all and begin to open to that innate perfection, that amazingness that we are. This thing is, let's undo this because it's kind of distracting. Okay, and much better. So here's what this Geshe writes. What is mind is the title of this chapter. And yesterday we spoke about the search for who we really are by paying attention to when we feel caught, when we feel embarrassed, when we feel emotional, and so on and so forth. And in that moment, tuning in and trying to find wordlessly, reach wordlessly within that emotion, that feeling, and try to find who it is that's feeling that way. Where is this solid person? We know scientifically that this body is going to decay and deteriorate regardless of how long we live. And so it can't be that, because our true reality never is born and never dies, and yet is fully present, fully. Since happiness and suffering depend upon the mind, if we want to avoid suffering and find true happiness, we need to understand the nature and functions of the mind. At first, this might seem to be quite straightforward, since we all have minds and we all know what the state of our mind is. Well, maybe if we've had a history of trauma, we don't necessarily know what the state of our mind is, because if it's been triggered, we shut down. And so we just have a kind of a blank, non-feeling state of mind. So we don't know that underlying that, or what triggered that was some intense fear. But in general, we know the state of our minds. Whether it is happy or sad, clear or confused, and so forth. However, if someone were to ask us what the nature of your mind is and how its functioning is, we would probably not be able to give a precise answer. We might not be able to give any kind of an answer. This indicates that we do not have a clear understanding of the mind. Some people think that the mind is the brain or some other part or function of the body, but this is incorrect. The body is a physical object that can be seen with the eyes and that can be photographed or operated on in surgery. The mind, on the other hand, is not a physical object. It cannot be seen with the eyes, nor can it be photographed or repaired by surgery. The brain, therefore, is not the mind, but simply part of the body. There's nothing within the body that can be identified as being our mind, because our body and mind are different entities. Yet, it's not 100% of the story. Our mind impacts our body, and our body impacts our mind. This whole polyvagal theory, which has been and was formulated 25 years ago and has been proven over and over and over again to be accurate. Expresses a communication between our brain, which of course is not the mind, and our body, and vice versa. And so perceptions and feelings and experiences that affect the body also affect the brain. And the whole thing is of a complicated experience. And yet who we really are, if you want to call it the true mind, while we have this body to function through, is not dependent upon the body. It is dependent upon the body to be revealed through practice in this life. When we die, if we die consciously and having done a lot of work to let go, then we naturally may experience the true nature of mind. But so many people die in fear, die clinging to what they had in life, to the point where in Chinese funerals, traditionally, paper effigies of money, of houses, of food, of all the kinds of things one would need to survive, are burnt with the body, on the assumption that these will be needed in the so-called afterlife. And it's rather interesting. I spent a week at a Chinese monastery in Singapore, whose main income source was cremations. And they had this vast, large, open building with 5 cremation furnaces there. And there was a lonely but incredibly large paper model of a vehicle, a car, sitting beside one of the cremation ovens because it was too big to go in. What does happen when we die? But better than that, who are we right now? Because if we understand that deeply, and increasingly deeply, we will live, as Oprah says, live our best life. We will see the true nature of reality, and as part of that, recognize that who we think we are is a picture, a novel, a story. And sure, in the relative world, it has some relevance, but in the absolute, it has none. And in the relative world, it serves, among other things, to keep us prisoner to a way of being, a way of perceiving, and causing ourselves pain and suffering. So it's really important to free ourselves from pain and suffering by opening to who we really are. And what was spoken of yesterday in terms of tuning in to the sensations in the body and searching for who it is that's feeling this stuff is a very, very effective exercise to move us in that direction of freedom. There was another piece. The essential point of understanding the mind is that liberation from suffering cannot be found outside the mind, though we try and we try through possessions, including possessions of people, through power, through prestige, through food, drink, sex, drugs, addictions of all sorts. And yet the only way to really be free is to go inward and rest in that awareness. And let's share some more about that from our buddy Dzigar Control Rinpoche in this book, It's Up to You, because it is necessarily up to each one of us, since nobody can wave a magic wand and bring us to awakening, much as it would be nice to experience. So this is utilizing thoughts and emotions. Thoughts and emotions will always rise. The purpose of practice is not to get rid of them. The purpose of practice is not to get rid of them. Really, the purpose of practice is to tune in and let yourself experience the felt sense of these emotions, and to just observe the thoughts without judgment, which initially is not easy to do. People have said, "Oh, I hate feeling this way." Well, what does hate feeling this way feel like in your body? That's the way to move beyond it, to free yourself from it. We can no more put a stop to thoughts and emotions than we could put a stop to the worldly circumstances that seemingly turn for or against us. We can't. Not sure what happened just then, but somehow the internet cut out, and but now we're back. So let's go back to this, what I was reading here. Thoughts and emotions will always arise. The purpose of practice is not to get rid of them. We can no more put a stop to thoughts and emotions than we can put a stop to the worldly circumstances that seemingly turn for or against us. We can, however, choose to welcome and work with them. Instead of trying to push away thoughts and emotions that aren't comfortable, rather to open to the physical experience of these and explore. Not by analysis, not by words, but by experience, experiencing the sensations and being open to possibility that this experience will reveal something, because it may well reveal something that could be very helpful, if not enlightening, a real insight. We can, however, choose to welcome and work with them. On one level, they're nothing but sensations. This is not something that is easy to recognize and work with, because particularly if we've had a difficult life, we don't want to feel things. We don't want to feel unpleasant sensations in our body. We've spent a life working against that, trying not to feel that way. But as Mitra-roshi used to say so many times, the way in is the way out. When we open our awareness to the bodily sensations and stay present as long as we can with them, they not only will dissolve, although if they're really intense, it may take any number of experiences of this before they actually really do let go, but persist. And I can guarantee that if you are fully present with whatever it feels like, it will dissolve. And what that does just physiologically is it weakens the connections between the synapses in your brain and weakens the habit pattern of feeling that way or being triggered by that feeling. When we don't solidify or judge them as good or bad, right or wrong, favorable or unfavorable, we can utilize them to progress on the path. We utilize thoughts and emotions by watching them arise and dissolve. As we do this, we see they're insubstantial. When we're able to see through them, we realize they can't really bind us, lead us astray, or distort our sense of reality. And we no longer expect them to cease. The very expecting the thoughts and emotions should cease is a misconception. We can free ourselves from this misconception in meditation. In the sutras, it says, what good is manure if not to fertilize sugarcane? Similarly, we can say, what good are thoughts and emotions? In fact, all of our experiences, if not to increase our realization. And if you've read Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi spoke of what he called mind weeds that come up in our practice and use them as manure to fertilize our practice. This is saying the same thing. Judgments, ideas, thoughts, feelings, sensations, these are all fuel for our practice. It's not like what we were originally taught if we did traditional Japanese Zen practice, but modern American culture, Western culture, is different from Japanese culture. And what worked in Japanese culture, more or less, does not work necessarily in the Western culture. We are very, very different. And well, enough said. What prevents us from making good use of these thoughts and emotions and so on are the fears and reactions that come from our self-importance. Therefore, the Buddha taught, let things be. Without feelings threatened or trying to control them, just let things arise naturally and let them be. This is sometimes easier said than done, because if we've had challenging experiences, our mind is seeking relentlessly to try to understand them, to reverse them, to change them, to make it not happen again. And so it can be a challenge to sit on the cushion and let the mind do its thing. But we find that when particularly if we sit on the cushion and do our Sessokkan practice, our extended breath practice, not with the intention of shutting anything out, but with the intention of reaching beyond ordinary perception to the truth, then all the yada yada begins to die down. It's quite amazing. It may take a long time to work with this. After all, we're very feeling people, and our cultures are such that behaving in certain ways is impactive, and not getting certain kinds of attention is painful, and getting certain kinds of attention is also painful. So we have a lot of wonderful fertilizer to work with in our practice. And I'd like last to share what I've shared many times before, which is the words of Longchenpa. The passions are intrinsically free. This is from a book called You Are the Eyes of the World. Though attachment, aversion, dullness, pride, and envy may arise, fully understand their inner energy. Recognize them in the very first moment before karma has been accumulated. In other words, as soon as you start to feel off balance, tune in. Really tune into the felt sense. Even though our normal way of working with that is to escape into our heads and frame it as a story, which can often just grow the feeling and cause more challenge and problems. Though attachment, aversion, dullness, pride, and envy may arise, fully understand their inner energy. Recognize them in the very first moment before karma has been accumulated. In the second moment, look nakedly at this state and relax in its presence. Freed, then whichever of the five passions arise becomes a pure presence, freed in its own place without being eliminated. It emerges as a pristine awareness that is clear, pleasurable, and not conditioned by thought. And again, it could take time to do this. But what better way to use our life? Because in my long experience of 80 some years, it's the only way to begin to become free and to increase that level of freedom through seeing where we're caught. Because when we see where we're caught clearly enough, tuning in, as Longchenpa taught, the caughtness begins to release. It's a miraculous practice. And of course, you don't stop there. You keep going. You keep going. You keep going. And you rest in the presence that can come forth. But you still remain aware. You don't stop anywhere. You don't hang out in some nice, comfy place in your mind, because sooner or later, reality comes rolling back and you get irritated, you get angry, something doesn't work out the way you want it to, and you're not as enlightened as you thought you were. And yet this practice really is miraculous. It really can free us. And the freedom that we can realize through it is beyond any freedom we can comprehend. It's a freedom that is free even in the midst of the most obstructed, and is built in. It's who we really are. So let us return to our practice and practice deeply, because it'll make a tremendous difference in our world, in our inner world and in our outer world, because our mind states subtly and not so subtly influence everything around us. And if it's a positive mind state, I think we all want to go there. We certainly like to experience positive mind states. Why not offer them to all beings? That all beings may have a chance to feel happy, liberated, at peace. It's within our grasp to do this. It's within our power to do this. And may we all do this so that one day all beings are freed in true liberation. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.